The committee, the whole meeting of council for, let's see, March 4th, 2024, and this is, I'm going to call the meeting to order at 5:30, and then I'll just give a bit of an overview of where we are, or where we have been, where we are, and council was presented with a budget November 30th. We tabled it at our council meeting on December 12th and had a budget meeting on January 17th. We started out at 1.2%. Right now it looks like with some items that we did add from the multi-year capital plan and not incidentals, unexpected, but necessary items. The last draft of the budget showed 1.6%. So now we felt this was a good time to invite our external groups that we fund or lease facilities to. And having said that, we are here tonight to listen to all of you and your wonderful presentations and hear about your successful 2023 year and what's ahead in 2024. And I know Fred said he's not going to tell us everything, but that's okay. Some will and some won't, and I'm okay with that. Whatever your presentation is, we're happy to have you here presenting. Following all the presentations, council may or may not have questions of your organization, so please stay at the speaker's desk until our questions are exhausted or that they have all been answered or not. Not that you can't answer all the questions, but we might have one that's off track that you can't. And following all the presentations, then we have a discussion item number 4 you'll see on your agenda page that I think you all grabbed when you're coming in. We also asked to see what, and you don't have we'll show them up here in the packages, but if you want to show page 2, whoever's got control of that screen, we asked for the asks to come back. I got page 2, but it must be page 3 then. Yeah, so when we set these meetings, we asked to come back with what the asks were as far as the information that was provided to us. So the 50 Club has got an ask there, but when you come up and it's not in writing, but when you come up to the presenter's desk, by all means, if there's a number or if there's information you're looking or funding that you're looking for, that's what we're here to listen to. And I know there's also a letter that was presented from the 50 Club that has some items in it. So that put the budget to 2.13%. So we're really on a good track here right now to see a really functional and well-received budget for our community. And we're not done yet, don't get me wrong, but we're certainly happy to have the external groups here now with their asks and with their presentations. So that's what that information is. What page do you have there for that? Is that page 3 that we're looking at right now? Oh, so I have this page 2 as well. So maybe because the agenda page wasn't counted, which is fine. So during item 4, we'll have some discussion. You're welcome to sit and listen to that too. But what we'll do with that information is what council's recommending. We'll go to our budget meeting on March 18th. It's Monday night, March 18th at 5:30 we start. So the outcome of this night will forward more information to the budget night, and we hope that we're really close to getting that all wrapped up. So having said that, I'm going to have approval of the agenda by consensus, if there's anybody who objects to the agenda. Councillor Baswick? Okay. All right, so we can move forward with the agenda as presented. I already told you stuff about item 3, so I was ahead of the agenda, but I was given that preamble that now we can skip because having said that, item 3.3 we'll jump into, and I know you were given an outline in the letter you received, and I'm going to at this point start the presentations, and I'll have the Didsbury District Historical Society come up, and I know that's Warren, Dawn, and Catherine's going to watch. I don't know. She's not standing. And Warren, if you'd like to give, I know Warren is the president of the Didsbury District Historical Society, and Dawn Stewart's the manager. And if there's anything else you'd like to add to my introductions, please do, Warren. And I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Are you active?
There we go. Good evening. Thank you for allowing us to talk to you today about something that is very near and dear to me, the Didsbury Museum. So thank you for the introduction. Next slide, please. Our beloved red brick school was first constructed in 1907. The first classes began in February of 1908. Also in 1908, the very first free library started in that same school in the bell tower. When classes began, there was about 120 students and 5 teachers, which is pretty impressive because the town was only about 500 people at the time. 1918, it was also used as a temporary hospital during the Spanish flu outbreak. And in World War II, it was used as a training facility for Canadian troops. In 1978, the Didsbury and District Historical Society was formed. And in 1989, the two worlds collided. You see, the school was no longer a school as of 1986. And in 1989, the Didsbury and District Historical Society moved into it, and it became the Didsbury Museum. It actually took a few years before we had it ready for a museum, but we did take it over in 1989. It was first designated as a registered historic resource in 1997, and it got accreditation as a provincial historic resource in 2011. Next slide, please. It is owned and operated by the Didsbury and District Historical Society, and that is our current board of directors. They are a very wonderful and enthusiastic group of people, and they have a lot of big tasks ahead of them. We have a really varied group in ages and backgrounds, and they're quite an incredible team. They work very closely with the volunteers and staff. Next slide, please. The Didsbury Museum functions largely on the back of volunteers. There's one part-time employee, and everything else that's done at that museum is done by volunteers. They are just absolutely amazing. We have a volunteer who has been at the museum for about 20 years. She is our archivist, and she knows more about every object within those walls than probably anybody ever will. Her assistant isn't really far behind her. She's been there about 16 or 17 years. They now have a team that helps them out. I don't know if you know this, but it takes about a full day to properly accession one gift from the community. That is a lot of work for this team. Keep in mind, all of those records used to be paper, and they are inputting them into the computer. I believe they're up to about 1993 now, so they're getting closer to the current stuff. But each of those items has to be found in the museum, matched to the paperwork. Usually it needs a new photograph, and then they carry on doing the accessioning into the computer. It's quite a task. Next slide, please. It doesn't stop there with our volunteers either. We actually have a team of about 50 active volunteers at the museum. Everybody contributes in so many different ways. Some of them do the baking, some run events, some do cleaning, some are cabinet makers, some do painting, gardeners, train guys. It's just absolutely incredible. Last year we had a record for volunteer hours at the Didsbury Museum. In total, we had 3,347 volunteer hours given to the Didsbury Museum. If you translate that into monetary, it is around $70,000. And that was given freely by these volunteers to the Didsbury Museum. We have volunteers that come from Carstairs and Olds, and we even have a junior volunteer whose family drives her up from Cochrane all the time, and they ended up falling in love with the museum, so now they come up and volunteer as a family. It is just absolutely incredible. Next slide, please. So here we have a graph that shows you our volunteer hours over time since we started keeping really accurate records, which is about 2016, to our current year. Now, notice that both our yearly visitors and our volunteer hours have increased, but specifically, those visitors have really, really jumped in the last couple of years. So far, we've looked at our numbers for January and February, and we show no signs of slowing down. Next slide, please. Here it just shows the breakout of the yearly visitors so that you can really see just how incredible it is. Our board, staff, volunteers, they all pull together as a team to make sure our visitors get the best experience and that we're preserving the past for future generations. Like, just look at that increase. It's really, really impressive. So you might be wondering what the common thread is here and how we accomplished such high numbers over the last couple of years. Next slide, please. It's a whole combination of things. We've been keeping our exhibits fresh and new. We've had a new fur exhibit go up, uranium and depression glass, a hat display, radios, laundry. We revamped the classroom, our Indigenous display, our photography display, not to mention all the hours that are put into seasonal decorating. We also have had a lot of increase in our rentals. We have a bunch of different groups that have their monthly or weekly meetings in the museum. We have Fiber and Fun, which is a community group that comes in every Tuesday and works on different craft projects. We have lots of people who have regularly started booking AGMs with us. We've had trade show meetings, the Mountain View Art Society meeting. We have the Seniors Friends and Fun come to the museum. So lots of different groups are utilizing that room that we have available. We also make sure that we do a lot of partnerships with different community groups in town and really showcase things that are important to the community. There's a lot of things to mention in there, but some of them include Communities in Bloom, the Mountain View Model Railroad Club. We have the Mountain View Arts Festival, just all kinds of things that we partner with the community. We had a revitalized social media presence. We've had a few volunteers that is kind of their niche. So we've asked them to step up and do some historical posts and just some community posts. We ourselves host a variety of programs, projects, and events. One of the ones that has become very successful over the last little while is Coffee and Conversation. A lot of times they're standing room only, and it's quite a compliment to the volunteer who organizes that. We also run the Veterans Banner Project, Pie Social, Sugarfest, Plant and Seed Swap, the Bells of Peace Remembrance Day ceremony, and so on. So our volunteers take on a lot of tasks and run a lot of events out of the museum. We also do a lot of community outreach. So we send memory boxes to Bethany and Aspen and Unit 1 at the Didsbury Hospital. We present wherever we can to make sure that we're reaching the people that may not come into the museum on a regular basis. Next slide, please. So what are our struggles? Well, we're successful in very many ways, but one of the struggles that we have is financial. You can basically break down our struggles in the financial area into both predictable and unpredictable expenses. Our predictable expenses, like a lot of people, are the rising cost of utilities. Our monthly energy, natural gas and electricity, has been as high as $2,330 just for 1 month. So we watch those averages go up and up. I mean, it is a beautiful old historical building, so it's not as efficient as maybe some modern ones are. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to strengthen our regular revenue streams to keep pace with the rising costs of utilities. We do get the opportunity to do casinos, and they used to cover our utilities right until the next casino, but that's no longer the case. So we're looking at filling in some of those gaps. Next slide, please. We also have a lot of unpredictable expenses. Last year, we did some repairs to our roof. It was about $25,000. We did end up getting a grant for half of that, but it came almost exactly a year after we finished the roof. So, and we never knew whether we were going to get it or not. We have a very old boiler. It's much more modern than the original one that was put into the museum, but it is still showing its age, and it's finally come to a point where we have to flush out that boiler and flush out the system and address some of the issues it has. That's estimated to be about $6,000. Looking forward into the future, we had a conservationist come in and give us a report on the exterior of the building, and that price tag is incredibly high. At today's prices, we're looking at about $600,000 to conserve and preserve the exterior of the building. It's an enormous task that's going to be a multiple year project, but it's something else that we're working towards, and it's completely unpredictable. We know we have these kind of expenses, but we never know exactly what they're going to be. So those are the kind of things that we work for and work towards, but they're under our category of unpredictable. Next slide, please. So this is just showing a lot of the numbers and how there's large fluctuations in our year-to-year budgets, and the board of directors does an amazing job at itemizing the most important things that are upcoming, planning for some of our unpredictable expenses, trying to find new sources of revenue to cover the gaps. But essentially the bottom line is we do a lot of really great things on a really tight budget. Next slide, please. So basically what we're asking is that we hope that this little presentation helps you guys visualize just everything that the Didsbury and District Historical Society, the Didsbury Museum, has been doing, and that you're inspired to invest a little bit more into the Didsbury Museum so that we can continue to have a positive impact on the community, on tourism, on schools, on seniors, and so much more. Thank you. Questions?
I was going to mention that the Councillor Deputy Mayor was sending his regrets, but he's here now, so he can do that himself for the first half. And it's just, so, not that you have to explain.
Oh, no,
He did mention that he would send his regrets.
We had an incident a few days ago, and I was dealing with that today, and I thought I was going to be later than I am, and I just wanted an apology. I was not trained in this, any of the presentation, and I'm glad it is the museum that came up first, because my heart is with you guys anyway. You know that, having been on the board, I understand the challenges there, so please accept my apology for being late.
Thank you.
All right, welcome. Any questions? Councillor Windsor?
Thank you, Mayor Hunter. You spoke a lot about some big expenses. One was the roof repairs that you had to do. You're talking about exterior sandstone and the repairs that have to be done on that. What are you doing in terms of fundraising to try to, I mean, it relates to the casino, helps with utilities, but it doesn't even cover utilities from casino to casino. So what activities, what undertakings are you doing to address those shortfalls in finances?
Thank you. It's quite a hurdle. And we know that there's some grants available to pay for part of it, and some grants will work in unison with other grants. So generally, when you have a preservation grant, it'll pay for up to half of the expenses, up to a certain cap, obviously. But then other grants sometimes will fill in those gaps. They might be for smaller amounts, $1,000 here and there. And our fundraising efforts, we're looking at escalating them. So we've always done some small fundraisers to fill in our regular gaps for our predictable expenses, but we're obviously looking at ramping that up. So one of the things that we're looking at this year is we're a big participant in the Didsbury Trade Show, and we're really hoping that the Didsbury Trade Show is going to end up being really successful, and we are going to be the recipients of any monies above and beyond what's needed for staffing and facilities and things like that. So we're really hoping that that gives us a good start on that external conservation bill that we have coming up. We do have a little bit set aside for it already, but really we have just over $6,000, so we're looking at 1%. So it's a start, but we just got this information from the conservationist. So it's and he did it in a multi-year plan. He gave us some targets to look at, so it's not like we have to do the whole project right away, obviously. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of things that we're going to have to look at to target the things that we need to do right away and what those costs are going to be.
Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor.
Just continuing on with that, I apologize, I missed the amount for the exterior renovations.
$600,000.
Other questions? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Hunter. You talk about the casino and that it funds to a degree your utilities for 2 of the 3 years, or relatively 2 of the 3 years. I'm wondering if you wanted to, since you have an audience of the community, if you wanted to give a plug about what's coming up, because you have a casino coming up, I believe.
We do, and so our casino is coming up right before Days of Yore, so it's right at the end of July. I think the 26th, 27th, something like that. It's a Monday, Tuesday. Anybody wants to partner up and we can help them with their casino, they can help us with our casino, but we're always looking for volunteers to fill those slots to make sure that we have enough people.
Or are you forgiven on that because of being a nonprofit?
No, as a charity, we really don't get any graces like that. We do really try to make an attempt to factor in what our projected costs are going to be, what those increases might look like in terms of utilities or other things. But as I mentioned, a lot of our expenses tend to be unpredictable, aside from things like utilities. Utilities being a predictable expense, we know that there is an increase coming and we've kind of planned for that. But really what we need to keep focused on is making sure that we have some kind of plan for those unpredictable expenses. And we don't know exactly how the federal government's decisions are going to affect us. Sometimes they offer us grants to help run the facility, maybe not the facility, but just to help keep operating. Post-COVID, they offered it to a lot of museums because museums weren't able to reopen. We never really closed unless we were mandated to close, so we were in a unique position. But many museums only run over the course of summer. We're a year-round museum, so we had to make a contingency plan for what reopening would look like for us. So that little bit that the federal government gave, and I think it was about $3,000, it certainly helped, but it didn't really offset any of our major costs and any major way. As I mentioned, 1 month our utilities can be over $2,000. So, but we did figure in an increase into the budget. So we're hoping that we've planned well enough for any of those kind of increases.
Do you feel that the ask that you're looking for is marginal, or is it enough to really bump you forward? In other words, maybe you really need $40,000. You know what I'm getting at, and you probably come in at a lower number. I guess my point is, you don't want to hurt you by, looking at a lower number if the real number is actually $4,000 or $5,000 more kind of thing.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because the board of directors has such a big task because the majority of our expenses are really unpredictable. When it comes to any kind of repairs and maintenance, those are our biggest costs. What we're looking at is a regular revenue stream to cover utilities and predictable expenses. Not so much, we would always, of course, take more. That's a given. We're doing the best with what we have, for sure. But essentially, at the end of the day, we're trying to accommodate for things like our utilities increases, where our revenue funding wasn't enough, our regular stream wasn't enough to cover that anymore. So we've kept it modest on purpose just because we have done so much with so little, and it's hard when so many of your big expenses are unpredictable to know what to ask for. It's a very old building, and it's in great shape for what it is, but it was built in 1907, so there's struggles. We're even struggling trying to change over as many lights as we can to LEDs because that certainly makes a difference. And the people who came before us did a great job of having light or motion sensors in all the rooms. So when nobody's in those rooms, the lights are out, which is fantastic. So they did plan ahead when they first implemented things, and we're trying to do the same going forward by changing to LED lights and things like that. So again, the board of directors does a great job of trying to make that plan for the future, but so many of our big costs are very unpredictable.
Thank you for that. I do understand that any registered historical building, if you're going to do any maintenance or repairs to it, your costs are escalated because of the demands of that particular idea. Because if you're going to put eavesdrop on them, they have to be exactly as they were back in 1907. I'm trying to find that. It's not only hard to find, but it's very expensive.
Make a synthetic product that looks very much like a cedar shake, but it has a bigger lifespan. It's just a better product. We don't have that option. We had to do cedar shakes. So we had to find a company that had big and very steep pitch roof. So there was a lot of complications. They had to make sure that our roof was done during the summer. They didn't want any frost on the roof because that would make it much more dangerous. There was so many things to consider. And so, yes.
I'm looking at your, but that's a one-time grant this year, or?
I think the Heritage Preservation, was that the $12,000 one?
Yeah.
That came in for the roof. So we did the roof. It ended up being in the budget.
A bit in COVID, because obviously.
We didn't experience hardly any closures during COVID. I think we were only closed for maybe 6 weeks. We were open the entire rest of the time. We just had restrictions, grants for the fun stuff because it looks good on them. So the federal government, we've applied for a grant for Canada Day because it went so well yesterday and we had so much